I was joined a short time ago by our Washington correspondent, Annalise Nielsen. Annalise, this meeting comes at a very important time in the history of the US-Australia alliance.
Kieran, this is a really interesting development that's going to be key to the Australian-US alliance. This is the first time that the Prime Minister Scott Morrison is meeting Joe Biden in person. They've had phone calls and indeed a Quad summit earlier in the year. But the fact that they are convening an in-person summit with also the leaders from India and Japan, as well as the President of the United States, shows that they are trying to push this Quad alliance forward. Now, this is going to be quite critical on a few different fronts, not just the COVID diplomacy that we've seen, the pledge of vaccines for countries around Southeast Asia, the Indo-Pacific. That's to directly counter what's been a large push from China in distributing their own brand of the vaccine, which has questionable efficacy but is a huge win for them in that soft power arena. What was interesting to see, though, is the statement put out by the White House about this alliance. In this statement, they said the Quad leaders will be focused on deepening our ties and advancing practical cooperation on areas such as combating COVID-19, addressing the climate crisis, partnering on emerging technologies in cyberspace, and promoting a free and open Indo-Pacific. You can bet your bottom dollar that China's ears are pricking up hearing promoting a free and open Indo-Pacific, because they see that as a threat to their dominance in the region. They see that as a direct counter to their sovereignty in areas where they've claimed territory like the South China Sea. But also of note is the fact that climate change is very high up on that agenda. We know that that's something that the Australian government and the Biden administration don't necessarily see eye to eye on, especially when it comes to furthering those carbon emission targets that Australia has set. There's pressure from the United States to be upping Australia's climate ambitions. But this is quite an elegant moment for Australia, that we do get to have this moment with the new leader in President Joe Biden in his first year, and that it will be more focused on that strategic capability, those issues around defence, and that's still a very strong part of the Australia-US alliance.
And Annalise, the US Secretary of State has faced a grilling over the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, but he insists it was a success.
Kieran, Antony Blinken's facing 2 days of grilling in Congress. It was first the House today, and he'll front the Senate tomorrow. He went for about 5 hours, saying he would take every single question each congressman or woman who wanted to speak, given a 5-minute slot. And some did get quite heated. There were a few interesting developments in this. One of the interesting points that came out while Antony Blinken was presenting virtually, it should be said, was around what they inherited from the Trump administration, in that they said that they were forced to adhere to a deadline that was set after initially pushing back the Trump administration's deadline. And they said that that caused many of the issues that they faced when they were forced to evacuate those 124,000 people.
Had he not followed through on his predecessor's commitment, attacks on our forces and those of our allies would have resumed, and with, at best, the prospect of restoring a stalemate and remaining stuck in Afghanistan under fire indefinitely.
One of the other interesting points was about how the Biden administration is dealing with Afghanistan's government, when they're not necessarily acknowledging that the Taliban is the government, but they've been forced into this position of negotiating with them. They consistently keep referring to it as a civil war where one side got the upper hand, but it's not enough in the long term to be taking that approach. And so this is where a number of Conservative members took that opportunity. And one interesting development that I thought kind of flew under the radar in 5 hours of congressional hearings was about Ashraf Ghani leaving Afghanistan. He didn't even tell the US that he was leaving. Antony Blinken saying as early as the night before he was promising to fight to the death.
What he told me in that conversation was that he would go along with that effort, but if the Taliban wouldn't, he would, and I paraphrase, fight to the death. That was Saturday night. He left the next day. I had no advance warning of that.
Polling has shown across America there was widespread support for leaving Afghanistan, but it's the way it was handled that's caused so much political damage for the Biden administration. While there is plenty to distract Americans in the meantime, the abortion debate, voting rights, the recall election in California, the wildfires, this has undermined President Biden's authority as a leader in a time of crisis, and that's something difficult to manage for the next few years. But whether this will impact them at midterms still does remain to be seen.